Okay, we're back with another episode of Mining Now. I'm your host, Jared Downey. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about labor shortages, immigration, Canadian winters, and how that all merges together. We've got as a guest on the show today, Anthony Lawley. He is the president and CEO of IVEY Group. We know about labor shortages. If you turn on the news, you'll hear about it all the time. And anybody in the mining sector knows some of the challenges. So we're going to, talk about those challenges, but also talk about the solutions and the process from the immigration side, what people coming here are experiencing, so that if you're doing hiring, you sort of understand their process as well. I'm going to cover a lot. Anthony, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on.
Hi, Jared. Thank you very much. Appreciate being here and talk with you today.
I asked you before the show, I know you've been on, some news stations and things like that, usually those are shorter forms. You haven't had a chance to really be on a show like this and really unpack all the things that you offer.
Yeah, Jared, I mean, it's pretty exciting. There's a lot of information related to immigration, international mobility, whatever you want to call it, bringing people to Canada to work. A lot of the times it's little tidbits of like, what are we doing to help the Ukrainian people that are coming here or things like that. So I'm excited to share a lot more details about how we work, how we operate, how this whole system can be leveraged to really help employers in Canada close the gap between what they're seeing in the Canadian market and what's available outside of Canada to them as well.
So where are you based out of? Ontario, right?
Yeah, so our corporate office is up in Sudbury, Ontario, one of the mining capitals of Canada as well, which we're happy to be located here. I'm from Northern Ontario originally, grew up in Timmins. We made Northern Ontario our home base. We operate in Toronto and Montreal and other parts of Quebec and Canada as well, but corporate office is here and most of our employees are here as well.
I'm out in BC, which makes up, and funny enough, having this conversation, my wife works on the immigration side. So I've had a little bit of insight into it. And in BC is sort of a unique thing. We were actually just talking about it a few days ago, that it's like 98% is small business in BC. Is it a similar setup out east in Ontario and Quebec and that there's so many small businesses? Is it the same percentage, do you think?
Yeah, we see a lot of that. A lot of our clients are smaller businesses. We do have some big corporate clients as well, but one of the bigger struggles we find is that the bigger corporate guys can afford to pay, larger salaries, offer greater benefits and things like that. And then the smaller businesses are really struggling to attract labor and then to retain as well. So it's a good mix, but you're right, especially in remote communities in Northern Ontario, Quebec, BC, as you mentioned. There's a lot of smaller companies and businesses as well, really struggling to find labor and people.
So where do you? I mean, I think you met with Dennis at PDAC, and he so why the mining focus specifically? I mean, obviously where you're located might speak for itself there, but can you talk a little bit about where you're focused on specifically within the mining sector?
Yeah. So my business partner and I, we founded IVEY Group 5 years ago. We started setting ourselves up in the GTA. We figured there'd be great opportunities for immigration and welcoming newcomers and finding them employment and things like this. And then we quickly found out that the regional or rural parts of Canada, specifically Northern Ontario, was really having a hard time attracting people. Why? Because immigrants are not landing in Northern Ontario or Northern Quebec or Northern BC. They're landing in Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, which we term it MTV. And what we found was the mining sector in particular was of big interest to us because of my background in manufacturing. And Antonio, my business partner as well, who's a mechatronics engineer from Mexico, with a lot of exposure in mining, that this is where we wanted to set up ourselves and set up our business. And we started in mining supply. So doing a lot of stuff with the suppliers to the mining sector, whether it be fabrication facilities or equipment dealers or things like that, because again, they were having a lot of their workers being hired by the bigger mining companies that are up here in Northern Ontario. So they had that struggle and the gap, and we were able to offer them a solution that worked for them.
Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors. First up, we have Proc. Proc is one of the largest manufacturers of mining conveyor components in the world. The PROC offering includes components with an emphasis on performance and reliability for all mining applications across a full range of PROC conveyor rollers, idlers, pulleys, and conveyor accessories. PROC is the market leader in innovation and the development of quality conveyor components. Their people are what sets them apart. The result is reliability and dependability for their customers. Visit proc.com to learn more. Next up, we have Micromine. As your mining projects accelerate, so should your technology. Micromine is a leading software provider to the global mining industry with solutions that support the entire life cycle from early exploration to advanced mine operation. Micromine enables explorers to prospect smarter, model faster, and estimate with greater confidence. They empower mining engineers to optimize strategic mine planning, streamline design, and schedule faster. Micromine's technology supports even the largest mines to gain greater operational control and boost performance. And they provide mining teams with reliable data management solutions to enhance insights, meet compliance, and safeguard digital assets. To learn how Micromine's next generation technology can help you, visit their website at micromine.com today. We also have Savannah Equipment. Savannah Equipment supplies new and used mining equipment around the world, from placer to underground to ore processing plants. They have gold concentrating tables, trommels, and mineral jigs in stock now to take advantage of the high gold prices. You can visit them at savannahequipment.com, where you will find more equipment every day. And of course, we also have CIM. The 2022 edition of the Maintenance, Engineering, and Reliability Mine Operators Conference, or MEMO, is coming to Sudbury at Science North from September 18th to 21st for a full in-person event. Join industry peers for 2 days of technical and keynote presentations where you will have the opportunity to learn about many of the ways the mining industry is leveraging technology to adapt to a new world. Networking events will offer a chance to build relationships with other mining professionals. The event also includes a trade show featuring some of the industry's most dynamic companies that is not to be missed. You can register at memo2022.cim.org. And last but not least, we have PowerZone Equipment. When you need a specialized team of world-class engineers for your oil and gas pipelines, dewatering, or any fluid handling needs, you want to visit powerzone.com. In addition to their inventory of rebuilt pumps, motors, engines, they also have an amazing team to design and engineer your systems, no matter the challenge, no matter the location. Get in the zone with PowerZone. Visit them at powerzone.com. And now let's get back to the interview.
I wanted to ask you something. We're going to cover a lot of ground, but it's when you're a smaller company, hiring is a very stressful process. I've worked a lot in small business, and it's such a big, it's sort of all hands on deck. You know, you're a small team, now you're adding someone in. It's just a bigger impact. And when you look at the immigration side, of course, that's where you specialize in. You know, what is the term, twice bitten, once shy, or something like that? I think I got it backwards actually, but is hiring, when you specifically, you know, I'm not talking about someone who's already here. I'm talking about if you're hiring someone who's coming into the country, it can be a real challenge. You know, things like even hiring, filtering out what universities people come from, trying to just look at a resume and figure out how much of it is real, and you know, communication can be a challenge and all that stuff. So can you talk about walking from the small business, specifically from that side, walking them through that process? Because I've seen firsthand it be quite challenging, and you know, and that's where you fill in this gap. So can you walk us through even that first conversation you're having with the 70-year-old business owner who's trying something they haven't tried before, and now he's asking you?
Yeah. And Jared, maybe what I can do is start with, you know, my background was in human resources. I was HR manager in manufacturing and struggling to find people. And this is where this whole thing about immigration came in, where, you know, I term it as a black box of, it's dealing with government, it's bureaucratic, it's long, it's complex, it's complicated. And, you know, long story short, the vision that we have at IVEY Group is to make the small business owner's life easy, or our corporate clients, their HR departments or what have you, easy by essentially hand-holding throughout that entire process. And you'll often hear a turnkey solution. That's truly the approach that we took at IVEY Group, and we still take today with working with our clients. And, you know, there's a lot of different things that I didn't know when we started IVEY Group, of like some of the things you mentioned, of what kind of schools are they going to, what kind of work experience do they have? Do they understand the safety standards? Are they using the same technologies as we use in Canada? How transferable are those skills to my work environment here, right? So the approach that we took at IVEY was that Antonio and I spent quite a significant amount of time touring all the countries that we wanted to recruit from. And we went to the educational institutions, we went to some employers. We wanted to learn about the culture and also learn about, as I mentioned, the transferability of skill. So we could say, yeah, you know what, these workers here have an awareness of, lockout, tagout, PPE. They're using very similar technologies, different, like similar brand names of equipment and things like this, which gave us comfort to be able to say, you know what, this can work and this will work because now we've seen it. We've talked to these individuals. We were able to evaluate their level of English, their competencies and things like this, which is really helpful for us when we're talking to businesses that have never done this before. And so the first part of it, when we're sitting down with either a business owner or a general manager or an HR manager, for example, is really, we want to have intimate knowledge of the business, two fronts. What do you do? What kind of competencies and skill sets do you need in your facility? But also getting a feel for your company culture, because sometimes what we term it is employer readiness to take on a project like this. And some employers have done this before. Some employers have a very diverse workforce. So it's easy. They're like, yeah, no problem. We can bring in people from Colombia or Mexico or Ukraine or parts of Africa, what have you. And that transition is a lot easier than for someone who's like, I don't know how to deal with this. Like my employees might not be too open to this because they've never, experienced this before. So we'll also help the employers get ready for the arrival of these workers. So first thing, as I mentioned, understanding the business, understanding the requirements of the role. And then we establish an immigration and recruitment strategy. So, based on that conversation, we'll make a recommendation to the employers of where do we think we should be recruiting from so that the transition is easier. And sometimes it's very open conversations. Sometimes it's like, I think workers from South America might transition easier, or workers from Eastern Europe or from parts of Africa or what have you. So we'll make a recommendation on that.
And could I just quickly jump in on a question on that? So that immigration by let's say country, is it because let's say this, like somewhere like Chile, where mining is there's world-class mines in Chile and major operations that so is that part of what's going into it? Just like you mentioned, the brands of the machines and things like that. Is that sort of what you're referring to? Is that this country, if let's say it's on the tech side, there's an area in India that they specialize in this type of processes, so it's transferable. Is that what you're referencing?
Yeah, 100%. And the three criteria that we use to make our recommendation is, first and foremost, their capability to do the work, so their technical knowledge that they have. The second is their ability to integrate culturally. So how is their English? How is their adjustment to cold climates and things like this? And then the third part is, how easy is it, I'm getting technical a little bit, but to obtain permanent status after their initial work permit. But first and foremost is exactly what you said, Jared, is, how transferable are the skills that they have to the work environment here, first and foremost. And that's beneficial for a safety perspective, but also for productivity, efficiency, things like this. So in mining in particular, we bring, I think we're on pace for 100 plus heavy equipment technicians this year, bringing them to Canada. Wow. And a lot of it is like, do they have CAT experience, Komatsu, John Deere or whatever it is? And it's like, yeah, you know what? Our recruiters do have candidates with that level of experience, principally coming from South America, parts of Colombia, Peru, and Chile. But that's kind of the first criteria that we use when we're making a recommendation on which strategy, which country that we're going to recruit from.
Can we talk? Actually, I want to go just something you said not to get technical here. So as soon as I hear that, of course, I'm going for it.
I want to get technical.
Yeah. So can you talk? Can you just give just a couple minutes? I want to move on to a few things, but I do want to talk about this because, again, I've seen this become a challenge once someone's within working for a company. Now there's that permitting. I've seen it be quite stressful for the person who's immigrated here because they're, waiting. And can you talk a little bit just about that expectation from the employer side of, when someone gets, I think, their permanent residency or I forget how Canada does it. But can you just walk us through that process and just what people can expect with that?
Yeah. So step one, 95% of the time is workers will come to Canada on a temporary basis. And in order for that to happen, the employers need to get approval from the government to hire temporary foreign worker. So, at the beginning of IVEY, we used to get criticized like, oh, you're bringing people here to steal jobs from Canadians, which is not the case, because we have to prove that through different posting methods that we can't find a Canadian, or the employer can't find a Canadian to do that work. We do that, we secure the approval, we apply for a work permit. Candidate comes to Canada, they have a work permit, which is specific to that employer in that work location, in that position for a 3-year period. During that time period, the other service that we offer specifically at IVEY Group is building a strategy on what's next. So what happens after those 3 years? 2 options can be available to them, to the workers and to the employer, is let's renew the permits. But ideally, what they want to do is help the worker to obtain permanent status, or what we call permanent residency in Canada. So there's different programs available depending on where the work location of the candidates and where the employer is operating. But there's federal programs, there's provincial programs, and then now a couple of years ago, the Canadian government implemented these regional or community-based programs. So it's quite interesting, but there's a lot of variables to it. But stage 1 is get them into Canada on a closed work permit, employer specific. And then we have a pathway that we establish for them to obtain that permanent status so they can stay forever. They never have to leave. They have the advantage of almost every other Canadian, except they can't vote.
Right. It's the criticism of taking jobs from Canadians and things like that. It's if you have done even a little bit of economic research, you know how ridiculous that is. But it's still, though, that huge gap of that workforce gap that Canada is running into. I mean, it's massive. Can you talk a little bit about that and then dovetail that into, are you getting a lot of, because this shortage is coming, I mean, we're running into it here, this shortage is coming, are you getting a lot more demand? People reaching out and saying, hey, can you, we need people yesterday?
Yeah. So, Jared, what is that? As you mentioned, it's not an opinion anymore. Maybe, 5 years ago when we were starting, it was like, yeah, you guys need immigration. But, before starting IVEY Group, our feasibility study was studying the future demographics of Canada and what did that look like? And we quickly came across several studies from Conference Board of Canada and other reputable sources that there's going to be a major gap in the Canadian labor market in the very near future. And we're seeing it today.
Right.
And there's actually 2 things that we're seeing, which is a labor shortage, which is we don't have enough people. And that's why our unemployment rate is so low in Canada right now. And the other part of it is that we have a skills gap. So we have people maybe that aren't able to work right now and they're wanting to work, but they don't have the skills necessary that the employers are looking for. So it's kind of like a double whammy where, we don't necessarily have the people. And now the ones that do want to work, maybe they don't have the skill set that the employers are looking for. Mm-hmm. So that's why we've specialized in mining, manufacturing, and forest product sector, where we're essentially bringing skilled tradespeople to Canada because they have the skill sets that the employers are looking for. They're motivated to work. They want to come here, start a new life, and bring their families, eventually obtain permanent status, etc. So, over the past couple of years, things did have a downturn because of everything that we knew that happened during that time period. But since then, things have ramped up like crazy. I mean, last year we brought over 300 people to Canada. This year we're on pace to bring over 800 and continuing to grow from there. I mean, our staff has doubled in the past 18 months. And demand is huge. We're getting a lot of referrals into Western Canada as well. So we've started to do business out there. Maintaining our focus, because it's every industry. We see it in restaurants and hotels and hospitality, healthcare, same. But like I said, we maintained our focus in the areas that we know that we're good at, and that we're able to find candidates to fill those roles. But we see it. I mean, there's like MIR, MIHR, they're an association, non-for-profit that does a lot of studies on the labor market and the demographics and mining in particular. And we've done some work with them and had a lot of conversations of what does that look like? And their last numbers were by 2030, there's a 10,000 person gap of the labor requirements in mining alone.
Mining alone.
Mining alone. And that's across Canada, but that's a huge gap. It's a huge gap, especially with all the large mining projects that are starting up, right in our, probably 300-kilometer radius.
About them. The lithium, if that's, I know the Ontario government is, they're trying to get this stuff green lit. There's a lot of companies just on the lithium side alone that we're going to be seeing those mines coming online. It looks like it is anyway. Yeah,
absolutely.
I was going to also ask, I want to talk a little bit about the partnerships. Again, I've seen a little bit more of it than maybe some people, just because my wife's worked in it for so long. The collaboration and the different organizations involved, and specializing in different streams of immigration. It is, if I didn't know anything about it and I just did a Google search, I would just close the computer. There's so much integration, and then there's different organizations, and it's so much.
It is.
Can you talk about sort of the collaboration? Like, I was on your website, I saw, affiliates, PDAC, Mind Connect, and then several other ones. Can you sort of talk about, the chambers, that network of organizations that you create, again, just to make the life a little bit easier for the businesses that are trying to get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So the approach that we took at IVEY Group from the very beginning was, I talked about employer readiness. That's one part of it, is, are the employers ready to accept newcomers into their business? But the second part of it that we quickly learned was, are the communities ready? And again, we took a focus outside of the bigger city centers on purpose. That was intentional. But we also found that there were some gaps as far as, the housing crisis, which is something we can talk about in a different chat if you want. But there's all these things that need to be taken into consideration. So the approach that we took was, we reached out to the economic development corporations of each community that we operate in, including the mayor's office. We spoke with the Chamber of Commerce. We have memberships in most of the communities we operate in as well, and including the non-for-profit settlement agencies, such as YMCA, for example, which is very prevalent in Northern Ontario. And then you have like the newcomer centers in those communities as well. And the way that we approach this is that it's a very holistic approach to making sure that this is successful. And we didn't want to just be like a headhunter / recruiter where it's like, okay, you need this position, here you go, have fun, figure it out, good luck. It's more like, we have a full integration team at IVEY. We call it the Community and Workplace Integration Team, which is working with these community organizations to ensure that the arrival of the newcomers and the integration into the workplace and into the communities is successful. And what does that mean? It means connecting with different volunteer or non-for-profit or publicly funded organizations that help with these things of, newcomers arrive to Canada. There's some that we have, they don't even know what a debit card is. Like, they don't use those things in their countries, right? Sometimes some countries, they're scared of police. Well, here it's like, hey, they're safe. They're good people. You don't have to worry about these things. Adjusting to winter, how to scrape off a car, all these things. And so there's a lot of, we call it a community hug, where we have communities that are really welcoming, embrace this opportunity, because it helps to increase from an economic perspective, helps to increase their population, their tax base, et cetera, which is good for them. And it's also great for the newcomers, who feel really welcome once they arrive, and that there's people there to greet them and to say, we're happy to have you in our community, and we want to help settle you and get your children in school, and maybe help your spouse find work, things like that. So those partnerships are extremely important for us. And, generally we haven't had any negative feedback even from any of these communities, because they want to have people enter their communities and help their populations grow, and things like that. So it's been a really, really good experience so far, taking that approach.
With that said, have you had someone that you've helped immigrate here call you the first cold snap and say, really?
Well, I'll tell you something. We had some people arrive to Sudbury, and there was 6 welders from Mexico that arrived November 15 of 2019. And what we are seeing is that winter 1 is fun and it's good, and they get excited and take pictures, and their cell phones are out with their gloves on and everything else. But then, winter 2 is like, okay, are you guys for real? Like, how do you do this? So yeah, like I said, the first winter is fun, even for the kids. Like, the children, they love it too, because it's brand new for them, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, 100%. It's a shock. We have to help get them prepared as much as we can. But Yeah, it's actually fun in year one to see because they get excited and they want to play outside and they want to do all these things that we got to do ever since we were kids growing up in Canada. But yeah, it's a shocker for some of them for sure.
Is there for you, is there a, is there a personal side of it? I mean, some jobs just sort of have an essence of being very gratifying. For you, it must, in any uh, career where you get to sort of help someone who wants to take their life from this to here, even, I'm not even saying from bad to good or anything, but just to change what they're doing and how they're doing it, and in this case where they're doing it from, and by an entire country. um I've said so many times, for me, I have a tough time. um I can't, if I went and lived in China, let's say for 20 years, my heart would still be rooted deeply, deeply as Canadian. It would just be a big challenge for me. So I just have the utmost admiration for people that do it, and then seeing the commitment that they have to the country that they come to. What's it like for you? Let's talk about the first year, the first few clients. What was that experience like? Having a company with a partner and starting this process with people.
Yeah, I mean, immigration is very, very close to me and my family. 3 out of my 4 grandparents immigrated to Canada a long time during the war. Like a lot of us in Canada have relatives that have gone through that. I was very close to my grandparents to understand their stories and their struggles and everything else that went along with it. And I find that very admirable, and they demonstrate high levels of perseverance, et cetera, et cetera. And I married an immigrant. My business partner is an immigrant as well. And we actually represent 17 different nationalities at IVEY Group, which I'm really proud of.
Oh, wow.
And, at the beginning of IVEY, before we grew to what we are today, I would be going to the airport with Antonio, and we'd pick up people at the airport and have a little welcome sign and everything else. And, we quickly understood that we're helping to create life-changing opportunities for these individuals. And, even further than that, it's generation changing because, we have people that are here, they met their spouse, they have children that are Canadian born now. And like, that's just something really, really incredible and really special. And when you see, I mean, sometimes our recruiters, they've recorded, a video call they had with a candidate when they're issuing the job offer. And sometimes you get these big, burly, rough and tough miners or underground heavy equipment mechanics or things like this. And then they start getting emotional because the opportunity that was given to them. And I feel it when I start talking about these things because it's real. It's real. And is there a level of gratification? 100%. Do I feel super blessed to be able to help facilitate this? By bridging the gap, between what Canadian employers are looking for and what this international talent wants and desires, 100%. And I think we all feel it at IVEY at a certain point where, it's pretty special. And we have seen it with our employers as well, where at the beginning, they're kind of nervous and not really sure. And then, they're all in, they're helping with all the integration and helping get them settled and find accommodations and take them out, snowmobiling and ice fishing and getting them exposure to all these things. And it's really, really special. And, it's part of our vision and our mission at IVEY Group is to maintain that closeness and not forget why we do what we do. And yeah, it's easy to get emotional about it because I can think of so many examples of people that came and they were so grateful for the opportunity and they just want to work. They just want to have an opportunity at a better life and, security for their children and maybe their future children as well. And it's pretty admirable, the things that they do, the sacrifices they make for themselves and for their families. It's pretty incredible.
What is you talked about the year 2, and I wanted to, like, if you look at a news cycle, of course, like you mentioned Ukraine, it's all over for, a few months. And I understand why. I mean, they run numbers, and are people picking up the story? Okay, the numbers are dropping, so they move on. I do understand why media does it that way. But sometimes we lose a lot of truth behind that because we don't see the rest of the story. The old Paul Harvey slogan. But can you talk a little bit more about those challenges that people coming here, especially on the professional side, face in those year 2 and 3 and 4, when, the first year you do something, I would imagine that it's sort of a blur. It's kind of like you just got so much happening and everything's different. Can you talk a little bit about those, those ongoing years that you've seen and the feedback you've got of maybe the challenges that people have faced as they're sort of further integrated into the culture and the society?
Yeah. So like I was saying, year 1 is pretty exciting. They're getting a feel for everything, getting used to the language, the climate, the culture, the food, all of these things. So it's all new, right? And then, usually what happens is the workers come alone for the first 3 to 6 months, and then their families come. So it's like another exciting moment where like, hey, cool, let me show you around the community. And like, we found a bigger apartment now that I can afford because I saved some money and like all these other things. And maybe, within the first year, they're lucky if they can afford to purchase a vehicle. But they do. And then they get excited. They get to tour around more around Canada and see other things. But the reality of it is that it's difficult, right? Because things set in where, they have to integrate themselves at first. And then, most of the time when the spouses are coming here, they might not speak as well English. So then it's like, how do I help my spouse to integrate into Canada? And how do we set ourselves up for success where, they're able to find work and be able to learn English and register in language training and things like this. And then the same with the children. And for the children, it's exciting, I think, because, it's a little bit different where they just drop them in the classroom if they don't speak English or French, and they just learn, like just pick it up and they make friends and they have fun and they do what they need to do. But it's, the reality setting in of, I want, because they see what all other Canadians have and what they were, blessed with being born here. And now they strive for these things as well. Right. But, there's struggles that a lot of people, again, it's about perseverance and fighting through this adversity because they do it and they're okay with it. They'll live in a 1-bedroom apartment with a family of 4 for a year and it's okay. They're happy, they're safe and they're okay. And they're saving money to buy a car and their priorities are just a little bit different. But it's mostly on the culture, climate, language, food side where it's like they need to adjust. And like you said, if you're going to China, it'd be like, wow, how do I deal with this? Our team is there for them a lot of the time. I still get text messages from some of the workers that came 3-4 years ago. Just let me know how they're doing, and reaching out and being thankful and grateful for the opportunity we helped to create for them.
Yeah. And I would imagine for a lot of people too, it's just, and I've seen that firsthand as well, is that you've got the family, even extended family back home and that their world is continuing. So sometimes you'll see quite stressful situations happening back home, but you're trying to bring your spouse with the kids here and, you're trying to excel at your job and you're trying to move, and it can those year 2 and 3 and 4 can really, a lot can happen in those in a way that would be hard for anybody to handle. And that sort of leads me to another question back to the employer side is retention. I mean, that is a huge, huge challenge in today's market. Can you lay out a couple things you've seen employers can do or ways that you've supported your clients to say, this is how you can retain people? Obviously, you can't retain everybody, but maybe just a few highlighted ways that people can provide that support to be able to retain their workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. I can, for sure. So the way that we term it is there's 2 types of loyalty that we're seeing. And then one of them is a technical loyalty, which is technically their work permit allows them only to work for you as an employer for the first 3 years in Canada. But over that time period, what we tell employers is you have 3 years to convince them to stay, because once they become a permanent resident, they're free to leave if they choose to. Right. And how can the employers do that is really being aware. And we've done training on this for some of our clients as well, because they wanted us to speak to their supervisors and their leadership group. And, a lot of it is patience and empathy and understanding, putting yourself in someone else's shoes and understanding what they're going through and taking the time to listen and to ask questions. And really, it's kind of like, respect 101, but it's just being nice, and caring about what they might be going through. And, you mentioned something about, family back home. It did happen. We all know what happened over the past couple of years, and some of their family members got extremely sick.
Terrible situations. Yeah.
Yeah. And with what's going on in Ukraine and everything else in the world, whereas there's family that was back home that was sick, mom, dad, maybe potentially, and they can't leave or they can't come back or whatever. So it was really super tough. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But we had a lot of employers that were extremely understanding, asking questions, offering support. And we saw it a lot with what was going on in Ukraine, where employers were paying to bring families over and all this stuff, like giving time off for them to figure things out. It was like, wow, we were pretty surprised at the reaction and that the employers were demonstrating to the workers. But that plays such a big role for these workers who are already grateful for the opportunity they were given to come and work for these employers in Canada. But by showing those things, it adds that much more to that relationship that you have with that worker and with their family.
This is a small detail, but again, I've had this discussion with people, and so I think it's a relevant one. And I want you to actually correct it. I might be wrong in this, but I was speaking with someone. They run a large factory in the Philippines. They're Filipino and they run a factory, but they're distributing their products out. And he said specifically to me, he said one of the differences there is that of course the labor's cheaper there, but the skill sets are more spread out. So if instead of hiring 2 people, they need to hire 3 people for the role. So I wanted to talk a little bit about managing expectations, where if you're coming from a country where the roles are more defined, you're working this job and this is your process, and then you carry it out. As opposed to a lot of in the Canadian market, you're going to see a lot of people wearing multiple hats. That's my perception. And I just wondered if you could touch on that. And if my perception is right, sort of talk about managing that expectation for business owners who are bringing someone in who might come from that culture where they're going to have a very clear role. And now you're saying, oh, can you do this? Can you do that? That sort of wearing these different hats culture that we have.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Jared. And I think it really depends on the type of position that you would be looking to hire for, and also which country that they're coming from. And we've seen it a lot with trades where you could be a welder, a machinist, a heavy equipment mechanic, a millwright, an electrician, where the transferability is quite good, where we see employers are like, wow, like these guys, they really know what they're doing and they can be up and running very, very quickly. Maybe where we've seen some further challenges is when they get put into a position, maybe of a team lead or some type of accountability for other employees. And the only reason being is because English, for the most part, is not their first language. In any case, really, or any countries, at least where IVEY is recruiting from, English would be their second language. So sometimes it takes a little bit more time. And we've seen this with heavy equipment technicians where the employers would like them to eventually transition to be a field technician where they can go on a mine site or they can, service equipment outside of the shop, but they'll start them, in the shop so that they can get more accustomed to the terminology, the languages, even listening to people over the radio, for example, which can sometimes be more difficult than being able to read lips or something like this. And that's where there's maybe a little bit more of a transition, but overall for, welding, machining, millwrighting, it's pretty transferable from what we've seen. And those positions too, for the most part, you're kind of isolated, like at a machine doing work. Right. When you're more on a production line, and we've done some of this as well in manufacturing, where you need to have higher levels of communication with different workers, like before and after your kind of process, then yeah, I can see it a little bit more there. But again, generally, like the employers and supervisors are getting trained on how to deal with these things and ask the right questions. And we haven't seen too many challenges there, to be totally honest with you.
Okay. No, it's a good clarification. Yeah. And it's specific to that industry as opposed to if you're hiring someone to do these. Yeah. So because you're bringing in people, the background check's already been done. You're integrating them into a role that they're coming from. And
exactly. Yeah. 100%. That's exactly what we do. Yep.
Just before we wrap up, I'm curious. I know you mentioned your business partner. Can you talk just a little bit about that? You guys have been in business now for a while. The company's grown. What has sort of been that key? What sort of are you 2 people that bring up 2 different skill sets, or do you both are very similar skill sets that sort of collaborate together to grow, or how is that set up?
Yeah, so it's actually kind of funny. So when Antonio and I connected, he's a mechatronics engineer, worked in manufacturing for robotics and automation. And him and I always talked about potentially getting into business together. My background, as I mentioned, is in human resources. And we were always talking about the future of the labor market in Canada. And he's like, oh man, it's going to be automation and robotics. And I'm like, it's got to be people. But how does this work exactly? And then I started to study a lot more the demographic side of people. And I'm like, man, it's immigration. And he's like, well, you know what? There's so many people in Mexico, because that's where he's from, that would love an opportunity to come to Canada. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, fine, but I don't know how to do this. So I figured it out. I got trained, licensed to practice immigration law in Canada. So I'm responsible for that part of the business. And then we just started. We're like, you know what? Let's just see if this will work. And we did, and it worked. And when workers started to show up, employers started to get excited and referrals, and then it just started to go from there. So Antonio is responsible for all of our relationships outside of Canada. So I term him as the brains of everything, because he finds all the great people that the employers are really happy with. I get them into the country. And then we have a third business partner that we added 2 years ago. And she's got a finance background. She's also an immigrant to Canada. She's got a finance operations background. So everything in the back end, IT, HR, finance is under her responsibility. So, you know, I think the keys to our success are really being true to our initial vision and mission for IVEY, and not diluting. And we said this so many times throughout the years, of not diluting what we said we were going to do, which would, you know, we can make more money if we didn't do the integration part, for example, because it takes less time. We don't need that team, but that is crucially important to what we do. And we've never diluted it. And there's other people that, you know, they do tidbits of what we do as a business, but we really feel like every part of our business and service offering is crucially important. And we're going to continue to do that. And because of that, we're getting referrals from our current clients, or repeat business too, where they already have workers here and they're like, hey, I'd like to bring in, 10, 15 more workers. We want to grow. We want to add a shift, et cetera. You guys did some great work. The quality of the workers were awesome. So let's keep working together. So that I think has been really, really key part of our success is, the balanced ownership team, as well as just staying true to why we got into this in the first place.
Has it been quite tempting though? I mean, you know, the integration part, I mean, I can see it being, I could see just by that, using that word, that's going to be a time consuming part of the business.
It is.
But I can also see that that's a huge value add, because if we're bringing in 10 people and all of our team we're hiring because we're busy. So we need support. Yeah,
exactly.
So has it ever really been tempting, or has it been pretty clear from the beginning this is part of what we offer?
It's been a non-negotiable. Have we talked about it? Yes. But, you know, it's always come to the conclusion of it's non-negotiable, and we train our employers too throughout the process. If they have an HR department and they're like, hey, I want to be involved in this, then we can show them and teach them how to do this as well, because they want to help on the integration side. But for the most part, like you said, they're like, guys, just take care of this, because like I have way too many things to do. You've done a great job first time around, and let's make this work. And the flip side to that too, Jared, is those partnerships that I spoke to you about, where we have established those partnerships. So sometimes, it's some of the settlement caseworkers from these organizations that are helping us too, right? So we've leveraged those relationships that we've built over the years. But it's crucially important, honestly. Like, I mean, finding the workers is one thing, getting them into the country is another. But, the biggest part, and you mentioned it earlier, is retention. Because if the workers come, they're here for 3 months, they go home, nobody's a winner, nobody's happy. So we have a very strict follow-up process for those first 3 months to make sure that things are working out. And because of that, our retention rate is extremely high. We're not batting 100%, but we're pretty darn close. And we're really, really proud of that, because the efforts that we've made to have those processes in place and take care of the people we're bringing in and the employers.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show, Anthony, because we've had a lot of people talk about their employment shortages, and it's a major challenge. And I know there's a lot of people going to be watching this show that are going to be looking for the information, and because they're trying to make choices on how to actually fill some of these gaps. Some of these are very technical gaps. So I want to thank you for coming on the show. I hope this isn't the last time, because there's a lot we can discuss.
Sure.
But I do appreciate just kind of unpacking everything for us.
Yeah, Jared, thank you. Much appreciated.
Okay, everyone. We're going to put lots of links and to reach out to Anthony and the IVEY Group. Thank you for watching. And if you have any other questions you want us to send over to them, you can send it to us as well, or just reach out to them directly. Please keep suggesting guests. As you can see, mining now, we're adding layers and layers of different people that are working in the industry, but also supporting the industry. So please keep it coming, and we will see you on the next episode of Mining Now.